But do clients actually get results without calls? That is the question I get more than any other question when I talk about call-free coaching. And I get it because everything that you've been taught, that we've been taught about coaching says that real transformation happens in real time, that you need to read body language and that clients need that live in the moment interaction to break through. Here's what I found after years of doing this and helping hundreds of coaches make the switch. Async clients don't just get results. In many cases, they get better results than your call-based clients. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why. Not theory, not wishful thinking, the actual reasons that async coaching often outperforms the old school call-based model. Now, before I make the case for async, I want to acknowledge something. The skepticism around this model is reasonable. If you've been a coach for any length of time, you've had those breakthrough moments on calls, the moments where a client's voice cracks and you know something shifted. The moment where you ask that targeted question and watch their face change. The moment where you hold space for a silence and something unlocks. Those moments are real and they matter. And when someone tells you that you can coach without calls, part of you is like, but what about those moments? Like the moments I just talked about. Don't I need to be there for those? And here's what I've learned. Those moments aren't actually about the call. They're about the quality of your attention and the timing of your insight. And what I'm going to show you is that async done right actually gives you more of both, not less. Now, I want to be honest about my bias here because, well, I'm an introvert. So when I first explored async, part of me was just looking for relief from the energy drain of Zooms. I expected there to be a slight trade-off. Maybe I'd get my energy back, but I'd have to be more available for clients. Well, that's not actually what happened. And understanding why changed everything for me. The skepticism is valid, but it's based on assumptions that actually don't hold up when you look at how clients make progress. So let me show you what I mean. The first reason async often outperforms calls is actually the most obvious one, but most coaches have never thought about it this way. Think about how traditional coaching works from a client's perspective, not yours, theirs. Your client is working on something. Let's say they're writing a sales page. It's Tuesday night, 9 p.m. They're in the zone, they're making progress, and then smack, they hit a wall. Something's not working. They can't figure out maybe the headline or the offer structure feels off, or they're second guessing the whole approach, the whole offer. In a traditional coaching model, what happens next? They wait. Their next call with you is, let's say next Friday. That's 3 days away. 3 days where the sales page sits unfinished. 3 days where momentum dies. 3 days where they either have to figure it out themselves, maybe get it wrong, or move on to something else and never come back to it. Or they just stall. By Friday, when you finally get on that coaching call, the moment has completely passed. Half the call is spent reconstructing where they were and what they were thinking. The other half is rushed because there's only so much time before you got to move on to your next client. Here's what happens in async. It's Tuesday night, 9 p.m. They hit that wall. They open an app. They send you a message. Hey, I'm stuck on the headline. Here's what I've got. What am I missing? They go to sleep. Wednesday morning, you see the message. You look at what they've written. You think about it. You send back a thoughtful response. The headline is focused on the feature, not the outcome. Try this angle instead. Also, your offer structure is bearing the best part. Move section 3 up to the top. They see your response at lunch by Wednesday afternoon. They've implemented it by Wednesday night. That sales page is now done. Same client, same problem, completely different outcome. In traditional coaching, your help arrives on the calendar schedule. In async, your help arrives when they actually need it. And that timing difference changes everything about how fast clients make progress. But here's the thing. Timing isn't the only thing that changes. The quality of your response changes too. And this is the most surprising part. I want you to think about the last coaching call you did. Specifically, I want you to think about how you answered questions. What happens in your brain? You've got maybe 10 seconds, 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds before silence gets awkward. You start talking, you're kind of thinking out loud, you're giving them something because dead air feels like a failure. You're also watching their face and managing their energy and tracking the time because you got a client coming up. So you give them an answer. It's good. Of course it's good. You're a good coach. It's helpful. But then later, maybe on a walk that night or in your shower the following morning, maybe something hits you. The real answer, the sharper insight, the better framework, the thing you wished you had actually said, the connection to something else you know that would have helped them more. That is your best answer. And on a live call, your clients never get it. If you're someone whose brain works by processing, who needs time to sit with information before the insight emerges, live calls are actively working against how you think. You're being forced to perform in a format that doesn't match your wiring, and your clients are getting your B game as a result. Now, here's what happens in Async. Client sends a question, maybe the sales page one I shared earlier. You read it. Maybe you read it twice. You don't have to respond immediately. There's no awkward silence. So you actually think. Maybe you pull up their website or actually look at whatever you need to look at before you answer. Maybe you check their last few messages to get the full context on what it is they're actually asking. Maybe you just let the question sit while you make coffee. And then when the insight lands, when you know what they actually need to hear, that's when you respond. Not your first answer, your best answer. And on those days where your brain isn't sharp, maybe you didn't sleep well, maybe your kiddos kept you up, maybe life is still lifing, and you're just not at your best. You don't have to fake it on camera. You respond tomorrow instead. Your clients never know the difference. They're just getting a great response every time when you are ready to give it. Async doesn't just change when you respond, it changes how you respond. You have time to think, time to research, time to give them an answer that you would have thought of 20 minutes after the call ended, except now that is the answer they get. So we've got better timing and better responses, but there's a third reason Async works so well, and it has to do with how your clients process information. So we've been talking about how Async changes things for you as the coach, but there's something happening on the client side that's equally as important. Think about how information lands for different people. Some people are verbal processors. They think by talking. They figure things live out in a conversation. Live calls are perfect for them. But some people, and it's more than you think, are written processors. They think by writing. They need to articulate the question in writing before they even know what they're asking. And they need to read your response maybe multiple times for it to really sink in. Again, if you're an introvert, you probably know exactly what I mean. You've been on calls where someone asks you a question and you fumbled through the answer. Then you've thought of the perfect response an hour later. That's not a flaw. That's just how some of our brains work. Your clients are the exact same way. In a live call, a verbal processor thrives, but a written processor is struggling. They're trying to articulate something in real time that they haven't fully formed yet. They're listening to your responses while also trying to remember it. They leave the call with a vague sense of what you actually said, but no artifact to return to. In Async, the written processor thrives. They send you a message, and the act of writing the question clarifies their thinking. Sometimes they even solve their own problem just by articulating it. When you respond, they read it. They can reread it. They can copy it into their notes. They can reference it in 6 weeks later when the same issue comes up. Your insight becomes a permanent asset, not a fading memory of a conversation. And here's something else. Some questions are vulnerable. Money issues, relationship issues, health issues, things people don't always want to say out loud on a recorded call in front of a group to live in your library forever. Writing creates safety. A private message feels different than speaking on camera. People share more, they go deeper, they ask the real question instead of the surface question. Async doesn't just work despite the lack of real-time interaction. For many clients, it works because of it. They think better in writing, they retain better in writing, and they share more openly in writing. Now, I know some of you are still thinking the one thing we haven't addressed, the objection that feels the most legitimate. What about body language? This is the objection I hear most from experienced coaches, and it deserves a real answer. Justin, I get all of that. But coaching isn't just about what people say, it's also what they don't say. I need to see their face, I need to read the hesitation, I need to notice when their energy shifts. That's where the real coaching happens. I'm not going to dismiss any of that because of course there's truth in that. On a live call, you can see when someone says, I'm fine, but their face says they're not fine. You can catch the micro expression when you mention the pricing and something tightens in their face. You can feel when the energy in the room shifts. So what do you lose in async? Well, you lose that real-time read. You lose the ability to adjust on the fly based on what you're seeing. You lose some of that felt sense of the conversation. Here's what you gain. You gain their considered thoughts instead of their reactive thoughts. When someone writes to you, they've already processed the initial emotion. They're giving you something more refined, more honest, more clear than that jumbled thing they might have said out loud. You gain the ability to ask follow-up questions. In async, if something feels off in their message, if you sense maybe they're not telling you the whole story, you can simply say, it sounds like there might be something missing. What else is going on? What's underneath this question? And then they can take time to actually reflect before answering. You gain accuracy over assumption. On a live call, you're interpreting body language, but you might be wrong. You're projecting meaning onto their actual facial expression. In async, you're responding to their actual words, and you can ask for clarification when something is unclear. And here's a practical reality. Reading body language requires you to be 100% fully present and sharp. And on days when you've got brain fog, or your energy is low, or you're just not at 100%, you're not actually reading their body language accurately anyways. You're guessing. Async doesn't require you to perform at your peak to deliver good coaching. Now, does this mean that all calls are never useful? No, there are situations where a live call genuinely helps. Complex situations where you need live back and forth quickly. Moments of crisis where someone needs a real support. Maybe a kickoff conversation where you're building a foundation. That's why hybrid models exist. Mostly async with occasional calls when they're actually needed. You lose something in async. I won't pretend that you don't. But you gain timing, quality, depth, and that often more than compensates. And for most coaching situations, what you lose isn't actually as essential as what we've been trained to believe. So we've got the theory, but what does this actually look like in practice? What happens when you run an async coaching business for years and watch the results compound? I've been doing this long enough to see patterns, and not just in my own clients, but in the hundreds of coaches who've adopted this model because of our training. Let me tell you what actually happens. First, clients implement faster. Now, this makes sense when you think about the timing issue. They're not waiting until the next call. They're getting unstuck in 24 hours instead of 7 days or worse, weeks. They're taking action when the momentum is hot. Second, clients become more resourceful. And this one surprised me. I expected async to create maybe a little bit more dependency, like clients would message constantly because there's no barrier to entry. The opposite happened. When someone has to write out their question or think about it more, often their answers, well, they're right in front of them. The process of articulating it helps them come to the right answer themselves. They become better problem solvers because the format requires them to think before they ask. And when they do ask, the questions are just better. They're more specific, more actionable, easier for you to answer in a useful way. And third, retention goes way up. This one is the one that matters, especially if you're thinking about the long-term math of your business. Async clients stay longer. Why? Because the relationship doesn't depend on a calendar appointment they have to keep showing up to. Life, well, it gets busy, especially if you're over 40. And missing a few weeks of messaging, that's not a big deal. They come back when they need it. The flexibility works for life so they don't cancel. And when you're building recurring revenue, well, I don't have to tell you, retention is everything. A client who stays 14 months instead of 2, 3, or 6 months is worth a lot more to your business. And async, almost by accident, improves retention. And fourth, your capacity increases without your hours increasing. In fact, your hours go way down. So does async actually work? Well, not only does it work, it often works better than the model we've been taught is essential. Better timing because your help arrives when they need it, not when the calendar says. Better quality because you give them the best answer, not your first answer. Better processing because clients think and write and retain more effectively, and better results. Faster implementation, more resourcefulness, and longer retention. If you've been wondering whether you could do this, whether your clients could get results without calls, I hope this video has given you some confidence, because the answer is yes, they will, often better results than they're getting now. Now, if you want to learn how to build this in your business, the system, the boundaries, the onboarding that makes async clients succeed, well, check out the link below. I cover everything in the Call Free Coaching Workshop. It's going to show you the step-by-step process to build this into your business. Again, the link is in the description. Appreciate you being here.